Salvete, Miki et Scipuli, and welcome back, beloved friends, to my classroom. Today, I'm proud to announce that this video was made in collaboration with a YouTuber I absolutely adore, Whisperbird. It was actually her video series playing as the Kujait that inspired my last video, and I am thrilled to continue this series with the next faction she'll be playing, the Vlandians. Let's start by discussing the history of the Vlandians and Bannerlord. The ancestors to the Vlandian people were seafaring adventurers and raiders who landed on the Calradian coasts. The Empire began to rely upon these adventuring bands for defense from the Azarine Battanians, eventually giving them lands for their service when the silver ran dry. After the Emperor's succession was challenged, a Vlandian noble called Osric Ironarm seized the imperial capital, burned it down, and declared himself King of Vlandia. First, I'll discuss the most obvious influence on the Vlandians, the Normans of France. 11th century Europe was terrorized by bands of marauding adventurers and raiders called Vikings. Charles III of France had the brave idea to recruit Vikings to defend himself from Vikings. He approached a famous chief named Rollo the Walker, and they agreed that, in exchange for a sizable chunk of French coastal land, Rollo would be loyal to Charles and defend France from further Viking raids. Rollo's descendants would merge with French culture, but retain their military prowess, becoming les Normands, the Normans. It goes without saying that this easily parallels Vlandian history, if you change the empire with France. What is also quite apparent is that Vlandian weaponry and armor is also decidedly Norman. In fact, it was the Normans who first used couched lances to devastating effects. It was the Normans who first adopted the widespread use of the kite shield wielded by the Vlandians. Moreover, the concept of knights as cavalry is also very Norman. For most of history following the fall of the Roman Empire, heavy cavalry was expensive, and the fractured kingdoms of Europe couldn't afford it. But European primogeniture, which excluded all but the firstborn son and inheritance, created a new class of rich, unlanded, and ambitious young men well trained in the art of warfare and hungry for glory. The Normans used these as mounted shock troops, effectively eliminating the high cost of equipping the cavalry. Now, even the Mountain Blade Wiki can tell you that the Vlandians were inspired by the Normans, but what the Mountain Blade Wiki misses out on is that they were also influenced by the Goths. No, not the emo ones, I mean the German barbarian ones, I mean the Visigoths. The Goths were a Germanic tribe of warriors, often hired by the Roman Empire as mercenaries and soldiers. The Romans employed the foederati system, where barbarian tribes would be given land to settle in exchange for military aid. Through this system, the Visigoths fought for Rome against their fellow barbarians, but frequently betrayed the empire and even sacked Rome itself. The Visigoths created an unofficial empire on the coast of Spain and southern France in a cruel mockery of the Empire of Rome. This would only be subdued by another Germanic invader, the Franks, much later. The Goths' history is just as similar to Vlandia as the Normans are, and fit much better in the time period of the game. As I have mentioned previously, Bannerlord is modeled after the Migration era, in which the Visigoths were one of the dominant powers, along with the Huns. It is also worth noting that the names of the Vlandians, like Uthbert, Derthert, Willand, and Osric, are closer to Gothic names than French names. My personal theory is that the Vlandians originated as a Gothic-style people whose culture eventually shifted to become more and more feudal, as happened to real-world Franks and Lombards. The Frankish connection was also supported by the eventual split of the Vlandian Empire into the kingdoms of Rhodox and Swadia, that we know from Mountain Blade Warband. This, in many ways, parallels the split of the Frankish Empire into Germany and France, and Lotharingia, but we're gonna forget Lotharingia. The Vlandian predilection for crossbows is also something of note. The Normans were fond of crossbows, in fact they were used at the famous Battle of Hastings, but they were not as ubiquitous in medieval history as one might think. They were fairly common, apparently, in the Roman times, as alluded to by the author Vagetius in his Theoria Militari. He suggests that crossbows were a fairly common hunting tool and occasionally brought into the military, though hilariously, he insists that they're so common they're not really worth mentioning, which is perhaps why no other source mentions them. The next time you play Mountain Blade, remember, there's real history to this game, and to many other games that you might not even see. If you have a suggestion for what you want to see me cover, please put it in the comments. Walete, and class dismissed.